Um, well, as Carrie said, my name is Cody Pasa. I am the managing director for Altoona, and then Metro office, which is downtown Des Moines in the East Village in Iowa. So I have a little bit about me. I have been in real estate for almost 19 years, actively selling, doing all that fun stuff. And then about going on 5 years now, became a broker, and then obviously manager of the offices. So love that side of it, and kind of going on that side of it with my career. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the objection handling side of things in real estate. So a little bit, obviously, feel free to pop in the chat if there's any objection handling stuff that anybody wants to talk about or wants to cover or just kind of discuss as well. That's fine. The biggest thing I think of as the real estate agent wise is I think of us as more problem solvers, and sometimes therapists as well, of course. But problem solvers. We're here to help facilitate transactions, keep them going. Sometimes I arguably say, selling a house is, yes, we are salespeople, but I personally have hardly or rarely walked into a house and said, I had to sell it. The house kind of sells itself. So that's kind of my take on that side of it. So one of the biggest objection side of things that I think as real estate agents face, sometimes the biggest one is ourselves. We always get in our own way, I think, a lot of times. There's several times where agents will, whether they have a bad door knocking experience or a bad call experience, or just a bad experience with a buyer or a seller, seems to always take you kind of down. So I had an agent that one time was doing great on making phone calls, cold calls, did all that stuff. And then there was one phone call that didn't go the way that they had planned, and the person on the other end was rude and said, don't ever call me again. I don't want you to ever list or sell my house or talk to me about real estate again. And that took that agent completely out of wanting to do anything else, because we kind of got in our way and got the objection. So obviously, as you guys know, objection handling, problem solving is part of our business, but you got to have tough skin in the real estate world as well. So that's one of the things that I think is important and key. Another objection wise that I came up with, or kind of talked about some of the things that we have, is not being, buyers or sellers not being ready to buy or sell. I think a way to handle that is to always ask the question, why? So I'm always a big why. Just tell me a reason, and if there's a reason behind it, then I'm all ears. But I think a lot of times, specifically in the seller's side of things, if they say, hey, I'm going to wait until next spring to sell. Okay, sounds great. Why? Just curious, why is it going to be next spring? 9 times out of 10, I found that they say, well, I just heard that spring is a really good time to sell. It is, but that's also a good time that everybody else thinks is a good time to sell. Houses still sell in the winter months, in the colder months. Houses are still selling, and there's still buyers out there actively wanting it. Plus, the competition is a little bit less. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, that's something that you may want to think about as well, just putting it out there. That has always helped out on my business side of things, is just kind of giving them a reason. I think as an industry or as a general whole, we need to or should do better. One of the things I talk about all the time is educating the public. Being the public spokespeople, I think, is huge, because we're the only one that's going to change that. The media is not going to help us. So they're going off of what everybody else is saying, what the media is saying. So if we just kind of let them know, hey, there are some other times, there's still several houses, thousands of houses that sell in the winter time and in the winter months. So really the best time to sell is when you're ready. If you're ready to sell, then I think now is probably a good time. And usually if you have that therapy session and that talk with them, it usually turns out they say, yeah, I've never thought about that. That's a good idea, or that's a good call, or any of that stuff. So that's one of them. Same thing, obviously, on the ready to buy. If they say they're not ready to buy, I always ask the question as well. Hey, you're not ready to buy yet. I'm not ready. Okay, just curious, why are you waiting to buy? What's holding you back? Elephant in the room that I'm sure they're all going to say is, well, interest rates are really high right now. Okay, good to know. Just curious, you say that they're really high. What do you think the interest rates are? And when usually the time that they answer that, it's they're probably Googling what the interest rates are. I know around here, if you're, they're saying that the average interest rates are 7.25, 7.5. I'm not a lender. I'm just guessing. This is what they were last I checked. But then you talk to some of the local loan originators here, and they're actually at like 6.25. So it's funny to have that conversation and ask them that why. And I think a lot of times that gets them, oh, they are actually only 6.25. Okay, well, that changes things a little bit or whatever. And then the other thing too, when they say they're not ready to buy, you ask them why, and they say, well, I've heard this one a lot recently too, that the market's going to crash. We've all heard that. The media said that. They throw out the big R, recession word. That's not the forecast that I have heard at all. So, but that's what the media is pushing out to them. I think that they just need somebody to lean on and an ear to tell them differently, because I think that's probably the biggest hurdle and feedback that you'll hear. But if you can educate them on that and let them know, hey, curious, what are interest rates, and just sit and listen and see what they say. And then if they say that they're concerned about the market crash or anything, how are you hearing that? Because I'm telling you, we're not feeling that right here. We're still short on listings. We need more inventory, and everything's still going crazy. So the one thing that I always I jokingly say about the prediction side of things, I remember back, doesn't matter, before 2020, I remember listening to an economist and all that stuff, and they predicted, and it stuck with me, a market crash in 2020. And I said, I just don't see that happening. I don't have a crystal ball, but I know the market didn't crash in 2020. So the waiting to buy thing, if there's a legitimate reason to, that's always good. I mean, like I said, as long as you know it and you listen to it, I think a lot of the reason why people aren't ready to buy or sell is just because we are that comforting ear that they need to hear, and they need that encouragement from somebody in the business that will actually encourage them to do them, and basically let them know it's okay. We're still selling houses. There's still several houses that are selling. So why don't we go ahead, and then when you're ready to do something, that's the time to do it. So just like I saw Todd's comment there, absolutely. Marry the house, date the rate. That is hands down the biggest thing. The key when you're ready to buy, if you're ready to buy, that's when you should buy. You buy when you're ready. I mean, the interest rates are always going to change. It's the roller coaster. So just kind of roll with it. So that's the buy or sell side of things. And obviously the interest rate as well is always a good thing. So you can bring that up because nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what they're going to do. The one thing I do know is that they're going to go up and they're going to go down just like everything else. Another little saying that I have that I always kind of liked is there's two types of concrete, the types that's cracked and the type that's going to crack. So it's kind of like the same saying as a concrete, maybe on the interest rate side of things. But anyways, squirrel moment. The other thing too, obviously, that we face in our industry, I think a lot of times, is when we're competing with another listing agent about house prices. So you're sitting down a listing presentation, you're sitting here, you're going through the listing presentation, you come up with your list price, and all of a sudden at the end of it, they're going to say, the sellers will say, oh, that's great, Cody, but XYZ agent said that they will do it for, or they are going to get us this price, which is $20,000 higher than what you just showed me. My take on that I always said is, hey, that's great. And I respect the other agent's opinion. A market price is just the opinion, or if the list price is an opinion of what I feel like your house should list at. But Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you could do me a favor, could you get XYZ agents comparables that they used? Because clearly they're different from mine. And I would like to see them, because if I missed it, my job is to get you the best price possible for your property. So if I missed one of the comparables that the other agent used, I'm happy to come in and adjust mine to make more sense and maybe get it closer to that, just so that way we can kind of see if we're on the same page. because we're all usually working with the same information. So I'd be curious to see where XYZ agent got that number from. Taking that approach to me always worked out a lot better, and kind of did the more professional side of things, and kind of coming at it from, hey, I'm willing. I'm willing. I may have made a mistake. I may have missed a comparable that the other agent had. So bring it to me. I'll talk you through it, and we'll see if we can come up with a little bit higher number. But this is kind of where mine landed. Don't ever second guess yourself, because usually what I found, the other agent, not all the time, but usually kind of doesn't have as detailed of a comparable price sheet or a comparable, that they're just kind of winging it and saying, hey, the neighbors here sold, back in 2022 and crazy price, so we can get this out of yours. Obviously we're coming off of the wild west out there, so now it's kind of going to take a little bit more skill and stuff like that for people to sit down with the sellers and show them and educate them on that process. So that's something that I heard of, and a lot of agents, as we all know, some will buy, I call it buying the listing. They're going to sit here, and I hear it all the time, they list it for 40, 50,000 over what it should be, and then in 2 weeks we go down 50 or 20,000 and 10,000. If you explain that to your seller, that's something that has always worked out well too. Let them know the best marketing time, as a lot of you guys probably know, is the first 2 weeks that the property is listed, because after 2 weeks, you're losing that newness, that freshness. And if you have it overpriced at that $40,000, $50,000 mark, then now you've become that house on the market that everybody wonders why it hasn't sold and why it's sitting there so long. And it's usually because it's overpriced. So having that scenario worked out and explaining your knowledge and your confidence to that seller typically will work, and will typically get them on the same page as you, and then asking and putting that other agent's feet to the fire a little bit too, on the comparable side of things. So that's kind of what I had on that for the other agent suggested list price stuff. So use that, try that. That's something that I kind of did that worked out well for me. And then while you're sitting at the listing table, we go through the listing presentation, and we all know the big question, elephant in the room that comes up, and that is commission. So a lot of times, obviously, that is a big objection on the commission side of things. Now, before I get into this, the one thing I always want to reiterate, we have to believe, you have to believe as an agent that you believe in what you do. If you don't believe in what you do as an agent, then this will never work. You've got to believe that. I truly wholeheartedly believe that real estate agents are essential, and that we're worth 17%, but we give them a discount at whatever your going market rate is. But you've got to believe that. And if you don't believe that, that's a tough one to sell. So with that said, the commission side of things, I used to always go into it when a seller asked me, hey, would you cut your commission? Here was old Cody, what I used to say. No, Mr. and Mr. Seller, I don't like to. I wish I could, but I'm going to be marketing your property. I'm going to be giving you feedback. I'm going to be doing all this other things for you. And plus that costs me money. Plus I've got to show gas, and I don't get reimbursed for the gas unless if I sell a house. So no, I'm sorry. That was, to me, that didn't work, because now I come across as I don't believe in what I do. And now we have to almost come up with an excuse as to why we're charging that commission. There is, of course, the classic paper commission thing where, you hold up a whole piece of paper, and if you say, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, here's the thing, here's the whole commission that that you're getting charged. Here's what I get. And then you rip it in half. And then here's what my brokerage gets. And then here's after my marketing fee, and then by the end of it, you're down to that little piece of paper. If you need to explain it, that's a way to do it, as more of a visual side of things. Anymore, when I get asked, Cody, will you cut your commission? I just say, no. I'm already cutting it, giving you this price, and all these things that I'm giving you, I'm not willing to do it. And I just be quiet. And that is so, and the reason that seems to work and is powerful for my market and for me anyways, they don't say anything. They just say, okay, I just thought I'd ask. They're looking on the internet of things that they should ask their agent when they go to the close or when they get to the listing table. And of course, one of the questions I'm sure on there is, will you ask them if they're going to cut their commission? So my biggest thing that I always just said was no, nope, not an option. Sorry. And not even say sorry. I just threw out sorry because, you know, if you want to act like you're sorry, but just no, I don't do that. Any other questions? You know, and that's kind of more of any other questions you have for me. That way you kind of just keep them on that path of, hey, that's not okay. I asked. So, hey, we asked, he wanted to do it. So, okay. Next, what do we get? You know, what else are we going to go through? So that's part of it. That's the other ones that I have. One of the other objections that I hear or hear a lot of is price reductions. That's obviously coming up into more of a normal market, having to do price reductions, which is great. Price reductions need to happen and should happen in a normal market. Sometimes the sellers are not on board with it, and that's a tough conversation to have. But if you are having the conversation with the sellers, keeping them up to date every weekday, whatever you do for your business plan, that's the key. Because then when that price reduction comes, then it's not as big of a shock. I've had agents that have a tough time with it when you haven't talked to the seller, haven't gave them feedback on any showings, haven't let them know anything, and then all of a sudden next time you call them, you say, hey, I need a price reduction. They're going to say, Cody, where have you been the last 2 weeks? I'm assuming you're doing something, but you're not. So now all of a sudden you're asking me to drop my price. Seems a little weird to me. So the other way that I always do is I was always big on communication, and price reductions come a little bit more as in tune with what they're thinking, because you're giving them feedback. You're saying, hey, everything's going great, but if they don't say anything else, then we're going to need a price reduction. My rule of thumb that I always personally did when I was selling is, if I have a seller, I let them know at the listing table, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's the thing. We're going to have 10 showings. If we have 10 showings and 0 offers, we're probably going to need to do a price reduction because something's off. And if we don't keep hearing the same feedback that the wall needs changed or the color or the paint or the whatever it is, there's another problem, and it's probably the price. So Mr. or Mrs. Seller, just to prepare you, I hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, we're all human. We all make mistakes. 10 showings. If we don't have 10 showings, I think that's probably time to have the discussion of the price reduction. So just so you are aware going into it, that whole thing, and kind of set that scenario up at the beginning seems to make it go a little bit easier. One of the things that I liked that I had heard in the past about price reductions, if they're not willing to do one, and I say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, right now, here comes another analogy. You are the highest bidder on your house. And they're usually like, what do you mean? Well, let's think of it like an auction. Right now, you are the highest bidder on your house. Nobody else is willing to bid what you are willing to pay for your house. So if you want to sell your house, we need to drop the price, because we can get some other bidders maybe interested if we lower the price, so you're not the highest bidder. Sometimes that resonates with certain sellers, and that's another objection handling side of thing that you can use. But once again, just to educate them on the information that they get every week from you. So if you throw that out there to them, sometimes that will help and resonate with them, if you think of it kind of like an auction side of things, like an auctioneer. The other side of it, one of the last ones that I have that we've all faced, we've all been there, we're all new in the business at one point, but I have heard that from some of the agents that are brand new into the business and say, hey, you know what, Cody, I would love to have you help me, but I know you have never sold a house before. Or, oh yeah, you sold like one last year. And I say, great. You know what that means to me is that, all these other agents have a lot of clients that they're working with, I'm going to have a lot less to focus on, and I'm going to focus on you, and I'm going to help you. And everybody has to start out somewhere, someplace, and here's where I am at. So I don't ever encourage personally agents to hide behind that, because if it is your first transaction, that's okay. I always say that I'm going to focus solely on you, and I have got a huge team behind me to support me. So really, it is me, and this might be my first one, but I've got a huge support staff that's helping me and guiding me along the way. So you're never going to have to worry about if you're getting taken care of, because I've got accountability myself, and I want to make sure that you're getting the best service as possible. So any other questions? And once again, just kind of approaching it up front. That's the key. So those were those were the objection handling things that I had on that. I don't know if there's any other ones that anybody else has. I think the key thing to sum it up on the objection handling is, I think educating them is huge. Educating your clients. Communication, of course, is huge. Keeping them in the loop no matter what you're doing, and not always calling them with a reason or something that you want from them. It's more of a checking in, even if it's buyers. Same thing with buyers. If you have a buyer set up on an auto search, whatever it may be, and you are going, I hear that all the time too, where there's a lot of agents that have 7 buyers and no listings to show them. They've shown them everything on the market. This is where I think it comes into us being in our own way. I always challenge the agents. What are you doing then? You have 7 buyers. And if you're sitting here waiting for a house to come on the market on the MLS, there's 75 other agents that are doing the exact same thing. And those agents are now going to be in multiple offer situations. So now you're going to have to write a competing offer, because that's all they're doing. Our obviously Coldwell Banker side of it, I bleed blue, love Coldwell Banker. That's not us. We are, let's do something different. Let's raise the bar. Let's go out and try to find some listings then that the buyer is going to work, that might work for the buyer. Whether it's door knocking, whether it's social media post. I've had some great success with social media post where you post it out there and say, hey, if clients are okay with it, if not, that's fine. But hey, meet Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. They are looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in wherever area. Price would like to stay under X amount of dollars. Please reach out to me if this sounds like your house, or if you know of something coming up into the future. Because that is huge too, to be able to actually let them know that you have buyers out there actively looking, and that you're doing something different that somebody else is not. So take those buyers, kind of make them your own, but do something different, as opposed to just waiting for something to pop up on the MLS, because I'm telling you, that's where every other agent is doing out there. A lot of other agents, I should say, are doing. And if it's something on the search criteria that's not coming up, then once again, that's where we should work with the buyer to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I know you said you wanted a fenced yard, but we're having a hard time. We're 3 weeks into this search and not one has come up in your price point with a fenced yard. Is that something that you would be open to maybe removing, to see if that opens up some criteria? Or, kind of, once again, talking them through it and being their voice of reason. Therapist sometime. But I think that they just need that guidance and that hand holding, because that's our job, is to help them and problem solve for them. If there's a problem, let's try to solve it, and get through kind of some of those sticky points that might be holding them up on things. So if you can't tell, I'm a big talker, so I'll talk for days. So Carrie, that is where I'm at so far. That's what I had before going over on time.